अस्सलाम वालेकुम क्लास। आपको चूंकि मेरी आवाज़ वहाँ नहीं पहुँच रही थी बार बार, despite all my best efforts, we could not hold a live session today. So the topic that was given to you for discussion that we were talking about is aestheticism. And as one of you have explained that aestheticism is actually the knowledge about the beauty. And then we discussed about how can we define beauty. So beauty can be considered as something that gives us pleasure, number one, and that is in a specific proportion. An object of beauty is considered beautiful as long as it is viewed from a specific perspective and it holds and contains a specific proportion. And by proportion, we mean that it is actually a combination of different qualities in a way that it sounds, that it becomes it becomes pleasant for us. For example, we cannot appreciate an object by staying too close to it or by staying too far from it. So, in order to appreciate and enjoy a beautiful scene, we are expected to maintain a proper distance and a proper perspective to that it becomes pleasant for us to view an object. And the very idea of perspective, once again, is very important in philosophy because philosophy does not believe in the innate beauty or in the innate ugliness of objects. Rather, philosophy holds it as a belief that most of the time the objects are beautiful and ugly because of a specific perspective with which or through which we look at them. For example, an apparently ugly looking child of an African family of slaves might not be beautiful for us if we try to judge him or her from the prevalent standards of white beauty, where the white complexion, the blue eyes, and the golden hair are considered the signs of beauty. But the same child, when he or she is viewed from the perspective of her mother, becomes beautiful. So it is again the validation of that philosophical idea that objects are not innately beautiful or innately ugly. They become ugly and beautiful because of a specific perspective with which we look at them. This class actually leads us towards the topic of today's discussion, and that I wanted to discuss but could not because of the poor connectivity, and that is the idea of philosophical nexus. So what is the philosophical nexus? What is the philosophical trio that we are talking about? So there are at least three important elements and components in that philosophical trio. Number one is the object in itself, number two, the onlooker, and number three, the very perspective with which an object is viewed or with which an object is actually positioned. So philosophy says, जो मैंने आपसे भी पहले भी बात कही है, that it is actually the object which is perhaps not all important in any philosophical inquiry. Rather, philosophy holds that an object is most of the time determined by the onlooker, the one who looks at the object. You as an onlooker, you as an observer of a particular object, you as a beholder of a particular reality, and uh, you as a participant of a particular reality, and then the ultimate angle and the perspective with which we try to appreciate and look at and understand or know an object. So these all three things are actually important and they determine how reality is perceived by us as human beings. For example, there are certain objects which give us pleasure. So what is pleasure and what is pleasant is not determined absolutely by things as pleasure giving or as or as unpleasant or sad, rather it is the situatedness of those objects. Sometimes it happens that you are inside your heart, you are sad. So even in the company of your friends, you cannot be happy. So you remain sad even in the company sometimes. So it is not always the friends and the company outside that gives you pleasure. So pleasure, there are certain other sources of pleasure in which you as an observer, as a beholder, as an onlooker of a particular experience is very important. Your own personality is very important. So philosophy आपसे ये कहती है कि you always look at an object from a particular perspective, and um, or an object is always filtered through individual consciousness with a particular angle and perspective. जब तक आप चीज़ों को उनके एंगल और पर्सपेक्टिव से नहीं देखेंगे, आप कभी भी चीज़ों को अप्रिशिएट नहीं कर सकते. And it is always by the change of your perspective and by the change of your angle that reality is reshaped, or reality becomes um, a changed reality. इसकी बड़ी सिंपल सी एग्जांपल आप इस तरीके देख सकते हैं that you are looking at an object from its front side, and I am looking the same object from its rear, from its back. So none of us is wrong in our understanding of of an object which is same, which is similar. But then when you look at it, you explain it from its front side. And when I look at it, I explain it from its back side. And we are getting an understanding of a particular object from the particular perspective with which we look at it. And none of us is wrong. So philosophy actually holds that your perspective not only determines and defines things, rather your perspective makes it right and wrong. So things are not innately right and things are not innately wrong, rather it is your perspective that makes them right and wrong. And this very idea is the core of aesthetic philosophy or aesthetic view of literature, where Walter Pater, and under the influence of Walter Pater, the other literary critics and writers, including the famous Oscar Wilde, uh, once declared that books are not good and bad. They are either written bad or written good. And now this is important, that things are innately good and bad are not innately good and bad. Their perspective and their situatedness and their particular angle actually make them so. और इसी एंगल को लेके जो एस्थेटिक व्यू ऑफ फिलॉसफी है, it actually has held it as a principle that literature and art should be written and should be produced for their own sake. So you do not produce literature for the sake of life and for the sake of propagating certain moral or human values. Neither literature has anything to do with the political and the social and the economic conditions of a particular time. Rather, literature is meant to give aesthetic pleasure, and aesthetic pleasure is all about beauty and proportion, and most of all, the particular perspective with which we look at it. ठीक है. So this was the very first point of aestheticism, and I'm sure you are now able to understand it. And then we are moving out now on to the second aspect, the second topic, and that is anthropocentrism. And what is anthropocentrism? It is actually, the word comes from uh, two uh, two separate words, anthrop and centris, center. Anthrop is human and center is uh, the nucleus. The main position in a circle is center. And anthropocentrism actually holds the supremacy and the superiority and centrality of human beings in this universe. So for a long period of time, the human philosophy, especially the Western philosophy, has taken human beings as a center and as a soul and as a core of every inquiry and every philosophical truth. And human beings are the center of this universe. Human beings are the crown of creation. And this very notion of the centrality of human beings is actually based on divine religion, where in Christianity as well as in Islam and other divine religions, human beings are considered the reflection of God. They are created in the image of God and they embody all those divine qualities which are possessed by the divine. And it is because of this that in the very first moments of creation, human beings were considered superior to even angels because they happened to know things which angels did not know. And that is what Quran very explicitly tells us when it talks about the superiority of the first man, Adam, the prophet Adam, because and then how angels were asked to bow down before Adam, and all of them obeyed the command of God except the arch uh, angel, uh, um, uh, whose name is um, Iblis in Islamic epistemology, the Lucifer. Um, so you would actually get to know how uh, uh, human beings have been considered at the center of all creation, and that is anthropocentrism. And as a result of this superiority of human beings, the Western philosophy and history actually have believed in the whole universe as subordinate to human will. Yani, we believe that all objects of physical, natural world and the material world, including the environment, the seas, the galaxies, and the stars, they are actually subservient to human will and human endeavor to discover. ये सारे ऑब्जेक्ट्स जो हैं वो इंसानों के मोहताज हैं और इंसान इनके ऊपर सुपीरियर है एंड ह्यूमन बींग्स आर आउट देयर टू एक्सप्लोर टू डिस्कवर टू क्रिएट टू to investigate and to invent different objects because they are all meant to be for the service of humankind. लेकिन इसकी एक फ्लिप साइड भी है इस एंथ्रोपोसेंट्रिज्म की और वो एंथ्रोपोसेंट्रिज्म की फ्लिप साइड ये है that human beings have been given immense freedom to explore and discover this universe, and sometimes they do it even at the cost of disturbing the balance, the ecological balance with which the whole universe has been created. So now we see that when human beings are allowed to explore and invent and create and produce, so then they do it even at the cost of other objects of this universe. So we build houses, we build factories, we establish industries by cutting trees, by spoiling the natural order of the things, by destroying the natural habitat of different animals and birds and insects. And we do it because we think that we are the masters of this universe and we are actually the crown of creation and are out there to preserve or perish, to make or unmake, to create or destroy. So this is actually the flip side of this anthropocentrism that holds that despite the superiority of human beings in this world and in this life and universe, human beings are not absolutely free with all license to do whatever they want to do in this universe. And if we do not stop this anthropocentric view of universe, then a time will come when human beings would themselves become the destroyer and the perishers of this universe. ये हम अपने आंखों के सामने आज होता देख भी रहे हैं. The whole idea of environmental crisis, the global warming, and the ecological imbalance that we have created in this universe is because of human beings. So the biggest loot and the plunder, the imbalance and the pollution that has been caused in 20th century is directly proportional to human desire to develop industrial, scientific, and technological progress, or it is in the name of these very high goals that we have been guilty of destroying the ecological balance of this universe. So this is what we call the anthropocentrism. और इसी वजह से अगर आप romantic tradition of literature देखें तो it does not believe in this anthropocentric view of universe, rather it believes in an anti-anthropocentric universe. जिसमें human beings are not the center, rather it is the nature and all the objects of nature which assume the central position, and human beings are just one part of this large cosmic order. So where mountains and rivers and birds and forests and skies and galaxies and rainfall cataracts, all these natural objects exist, so do human beings. And human beings are not superior to other objects of nature. And romantic tradition also holds it as a fundamental principle that the same breath and soul is in other objects that we see in human beings. So human beings and the whole universe is connected with the same breath and soul and the spirit. So this is something which is very very shared among all these in all these objects, whether they are human or they are non-human or extra-human. और इसी की वजह से जो इस्लामिक फ़िलॉसफ़ी के अंदर वहदतुल वजूद और वहदतुल शहूद का जो फ़लसफ़ा है, it is also a reflection of this, that we are all created by the divine, and so we all possess the divine spirit, and the same breath that actually has been given to human beings is the same that runs through water, and that runs through mountains, and that runs through other animal creatures. So this is what we call the anthropocentrism. So class, I am sure आपको ये जो आज के concepts है ये समझ में आ गए होंगे. मैं repeat कर रही हूँ. Today we have talked about aestheticism, anthropocentrism, and we have also talked about the notion of beauty, and beauty in relation to proportion, and beauty in relation to perspective. And as a related point, I have talked with you the idea of philosophical trio or philosophical nexus, where philosophy holds that there are at least three things which made an object an object. Number one, the object in itself. Number two, the onlooker, the observer who looks at an object. And number three, the angle and the perspective with which an object is viewed. So reality actually changes and shifts its color, its face, and its nature as a result of the onlooker and the particular perspective with which it is viewed. So I'm sure you are able to get some sense out of it. I am sending you this recording and you can listen to it, and please I will also let you know the next two topics that the next two roll numbers are expected to discuss in the class.